All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Mike Grossman. Mike, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's great to be here.
See, you know what? I have really been looking forward to this, Mike. And I got to start off by just giving a shout out to Chris Baker because Chris is a PR person for you. And he reached out to me on the Quoted platform a little while back. And I'll tell you what, he is really, really good at talking you up.
That's great.
And by the time I got through reading what he had wrote and sent over to me, I was like, heck yeah, I want to talk with Mike and get to know him a little bit better. And so you and I, we've already had that conversation, and man, time flies because I can't believe it's already been about a month since you and I spoke last.
It hasn't actually been that long. Yeah, it
Yeah, it
does
was on
fly.
it was on July 8th. So
Wow.
time flies.
Yeah, and actually, I spent almost 2 weeks in Australia between then and now,
Yeah,
visiting
I
visiting
remember
my
you were
kids.
telling me that.
So
Nice. You have a good trip?
it was great. It's very strange to have both kids in Australia because I met my wife there 38 years ago, but of course, we now live in California. So the fact that the kids are now both grown, but also living in different cities in Australia isn't what we would have expected. But it was fun to see them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'll tell you, yeah, I really appreciated the conversation that we had last time around, and I've definitely been looking forward to this conversation and being able to just do this interview with you. And well, I'm just going to start with a nice, simple, easy question to get us rolling, and then we'll just
Yeah.
dig in deeper from there. But we'll just start with Mike. What do you do and who do you serve?
Well, most of my career has been focused on running venture-funded, early-stage innovative software companies.
Okay.
And I guess there are three constituencies. So the question of who do I serve in that sort of context, there's customers, there's employees, and then there's shareholders. And I think that I serve all three. So customers, the goal is to create an amazing experience so that customers think that the products are extremely helpful and very well designed and executed. Employees, I've always wanted to achieve a very aspirational goal, which in some sense is impossible to achieve pervasively. But that's where employees can say, this is the best company I've ever worked at. And then for shareholders, you're trying to deliver a return
Yeah.
and enable them to make money. So those are the three. Abstracting above that, though, what I really focus on more than anything else are the people I work with and the people in my family. So they're really the people that I serve most.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
So, and there, yes, that totally makes sense. Well, let me ask you, so how did you even get into doing what you do now, Mike? What is your backstory?
Yeah, it's a half by accident and half intentional. So when
Okay.
I was a teenager and in college, I realized that I was really interested in doing entrepreneurial things. And so that was what I thought I would do professionally. I would become a serial entrepreneur and create a series of companies over the course of the years. It took a while to actually do that on a full-time basis. So when I was in my mid-20s, I co-founded my first company. It actually wasn't a technology company. It was a artwear T-shirt company. It had
Okay.
among other properties, the exclusive license to Norman Rockwell's art for reproduction on
Wow.
T-shirts and sweatshirts. And then about 6 years later, I left my more traditional corporate job to become a full-time entrepreneur and CEO.
Okay.
And I spent 10 years on that odyssey. And then this was the twist, is that at around the age of 40, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next after that company got acquired. And the people I had started companies with before were no longer available for various reasons.
Okay.
And I was convinced to come into an existing company, a pre-revenue existing company, as the CEO. And I regard the CEO role as different than the entrepreneur's role.
Mhm.
And that was really where I started, in some sense, to become a professional CEO. And so then I ended up spending the last 20 years running a series of companies where in each instance I was recruited in. That I hadn't anticipated. Hadn't understood the distinction between entrepreneur and CEO when I got started, and I also didn't expect that I would really gravitate towards the CEO part of that
Okay.
to an increasing extent as I got older.
So what is the distinction that you discovered, and what is the difference between entrepreneur and CEO?
I mean, certainly there's some fusion there. I mean, I think of myself as an entrepreneurial CEO.
Mhm.
So both pieces come together. But, when you're an entrepreneur, you don't really have a team at the beginning. I mean, or you have a very small team and you're
Yeah,
trying to pivot and shift and find a way to build a business out of nothing. You're trying to create momentum literally out of nothing. Typically, when you're recruited in as a CEO into these companies, there's some level of momentum that's already been achieved, often over a period of years, and the organization tends to be somewhat larger. And so the role is more of a management job. It's more around creating a culture, organizing everyone, prioritizing where the business is going to go. There's certainly elements that cross over, but I think it's different in a lot of ways. And I
yeah,
think there are some great entrepreneurs I've met that don't really uh, feel as comfortable in the role of CEO. And
mhm,
I've met some really great CEOs who it's probably not as well suited to start companies.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. That totally makes sense. I would kind of consider myself that way. I don't know. I mean, but I've never really considered myself a leader per se in that way. Like
yeah,
in fact, I have friends who have built companies with lots of team and lots of employees and stuff. And I remember the first time back in let me see, actually, yeah, 2007, a friend of mine invited me down to, well, I was already going to Phoenix. I was going to be in town. He said, Kevin, why don't you come in a day early? He's like, and I'll give you a tour of the place.
yeah,
And I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. So I went over to his place and he did. He took me on a tour and we went all around. He went introduced me to all these different departments and who's running this and that. And we get back to his office and he's like, well, what'd you think, Kev? And I'm like, you know what, Dan? What you've put together is so impressive. And for me personally, I'd want nothing to do with it.
yeah,
and
I
so,
understand.
and so that's and still to this day, I've never
Yeah.
built a company like that, and have no desire to.
Yeah, absolutely
And,
understand. And I think that that resonates with some people and it doesn't resonate with other people because,
yeah,
we're all wired differently. I think for me, when I was earlier in my career and more focused on the entrepreneurial side of the equation, I was more focused on the excitement around trying to build something that had not been built before or,
yeah, yeah,
create something.
yeah,
And in more recent years, while trying to build a business and have it be successful is obviously the key part of the job, what I've found more motivating is actually trying to help the people I work with
okay.
and help develop people's careers, help motivate people, the
Hmm.
culture of the organization, the environment everyone's working in. So that's a shift that I wouldn't have anticipated if you had spoken to me, 35 years ago.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into that deeper. What does inspire you most about the work you get to do and the impact that you're making, Mike?
I think there are two pieces to it. And one of them is I I found that I really care about the people that I work with, the people. You asked the question of who do I serve, basically other people. I find that very motivating,
Yeah.
and I think it's a, a great responsibility when you're running these types of organizations. Now, having said all that, I still really enjoy the creative aspects of the job, and so it's really the fusion of those two things. It's people on the one side and creativity on the other side.
Yeah. 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 So, what is an example of a result that you have helped deliver that you are just incredibly proud of? And you can name names or not name names that are associated with that. I mean, I'll leave that totally up to you.
That's interesting. How would I answer that question? I mean, the easiest answer is that my last company ended up being acquired successfully for many hundreds of millions of dollars. It was a great
Okay.
outcome. But the reason it was because, along with a very strong team, we just built a great group, a great culture with extremely high customer satisfaction scores and extremely passionate employees and very values driven.
Yeah.
And I think I would say that that's what I'm most proud of. The fact that the outcome ended up being good is nice.
Mhm.
In fact, it's very nice. But the reason the outcome was so good is because of all of these other pieces, and that's what
Yes.
I'm most
Yeah.
proud of. And
Yeah.
in a broader sense, as I look across the six companies, the six venture funded companies that I've run, some of them have done better than others. There's been all sorts of ups and downs along the way. They've been in very different industries. But the one common theme is that they've all, I think, had very strong values-driven cultures.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
am very proud of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So with where you're at right now and what you've achieved up to this point, what's your vision going forward from here, Mike?
I have two tracks right now. So I
Okay.
mentioned creativity. One of them is a creative track, and it's something and I mean a fully creative, more artistic track. And it's something that I've not really had a chance to pursue until recent years. So, as an example, I recently wrote a book, and that book was really a creative exercise. I'm now working on a short film, and I'm looking forward to doing projects like that so that moving forward, I always have a creative effort that I'm focused on.
Very good.
But on the professional side, I also have a mix of activities. I informally coach close to 10 first-time CEOs. I'm
Okay.
on the board of four companies, and I'm always brainstorming new ideas. So the entrepreneurial instinct is still there.
Yeah.
And I'm always entertaining new CEO opportunities. And so my guess is that I'll run at least one more company before all is said and done.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, okay, so now that we've got a little bit of context set here and listeners have a little bit of idea of who you are, Mike, and what you're all about, I want to switch gears just a little bit. And I want to start digging into the relationship piece of all of
Okay.
this. So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear about your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Well, in a business context, I was very fortunate to meet a fellow named Bill Campbell
Okay.
a while back when I used to work at Intuit, and he was the CEO of the company. And when I co-founded my first technology company, Bill ended up becoming a coach. And let me tell you a little bit about Bill's backstory.
Yeah.
He was a remarkable guy. He had been a college football coach in his 30s and the 20s and 30s, and then when he was about 40, he decided to change careers. Ended up going into business. Ended up coming out to Silicon Valley, where he, within a few years, was the head of marketing uh, and sales for Apple. He ended up
Okay.
as the CEO of Intuit and ultimately as the most influential board member at Apple, most influential advisor at Google, and so on. But he also took under his wing a bunch of less well-known people. And I was fortunate to be one of those people. And so for about 10 years, I met with Bill typically 1 to 2 times a week.
Okay.
And much of what I do as a CEO, I learned from Bill. And so that had a very profound impact about with respect to how I do my job. But he also, in a much more tangible sense, had a very big impact on not just my life, but my family's life. The reason I'm sitting in this house that I'm in as I talk to you is thanks to advice that Bill gave me at a very critical juncture.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
a key moment in a business transaction where we had an opportunity to sell the company. There was a contract that had been written that I had signed a year earlier with that acquirer's competitor, and I made a mistake in the contract. I missed the fact that a certain clause could be read in more than one way, And if
Yeah.
it was read the bad way, we wouldn't be able to sell the company.
Wow.
And
Okay.
Bill advised me to do something that the board told me not to do, which was to confront the issue directly, to meet with the person from the company with which we had this agreement, and to try to convince him to let us out of the agreement. And I didn't know how I was going to pull that off, but I did my best and it worked.
Wow.
And then a week later, the acquirer, Dun and Bradstreet, noticed the clause in the agreement and said, "We have a big problem." And I was able to say, "No, we don't anymore," because that contract no longer exists. So
Wow.
that's how we were able to sell that company. That's how I was able to buy this house. And so Bill had a very tangible impact.
Yeah.
That's one answer to your question. I would say that you asked it in a very broad way, like biggest impact on my life. I would have to say meeting my wife in Melbourne, Australia 38 years ago. So from a personal standpoint, the person who transformed my life the most was her. But from a business standpoint, it was Bill Campbell.
Very good. Well, let's dig into more about the impact that your wife has done. Let's honor her a little bit too and stuff. And so tell us some of that story.
I went to Australia because I thought it would be exciting to have a summer job for a couple months in a different country.
Okay.
And I was a law student at the time, and my roommate noticed that there was a poster that had been put up about an Australian law firm coming on campus looking for a summer associate. And he mentioned it to me, and I said, "That sounds interesting." So I applied for the job and, accidentally got it. And I was told that I was going to be going to Brisbane, Australia. And about 6 weeks before I left, they changed it to Melbourne. And within a week, I ended up meeting my wife, and it was completely accidental. In fact, funny part of this is my mother, before I left, said, "What happens if you meet somebody there?" And I assured her there was no chance that would happen. And famous last words.
Yeah,
And she
right.
was she was right to ask the question, and my answer turned out to be completely wrong. But once we met, it was pretty clear what we needed to do. And for the next 2 years, I was in Boston, she was in Melbourne, and this was in a time before email or text or
Okay.
Zoom or FaceTime. But we found a way to keep the relationship going, and we got married. And so, and it's been great, just to be clear. So she's just an outstanding human being and very inspiring, enormously supportive, uh, extremely empathetic, very high integrity. And so everything about my life now really is connected to that largely random event
Yeah.
of meeting her in Melbourne. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, our kids, our life, I feel quite grateful. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Mike, you and I are two really blessed guys in that regard. And gosh, I mean, I'm just looking at the date here. In 10 more days, my wife and I will celebrate our 21st anniversary. And it's like, I am so grateful to just have Lisa in my life and to have met her those years ago. And I can tell you, I wouldn't be doing what I do if not for the role that she's had in my life too,
how did the
And
two of you meet?
we actually met, my brother had introduced us. And so I had already been married before. I got married originally back in 2000, and that marriage lasted about 4 years. And in fact, you know what? I felt like such a failure after that first marriage because I was always raised by my parents. I just thought once you're married, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I worked it out, and it wasn't all on me, but I'll tell you, it gave me some real insight. And but then when my brother told me about Lisa, my first question was, and I knew because I'd been dating and stuff, and there was, pretty much every girl that I dated had children, one or two. Then when Kyle starts telling me about his neighbor girl, he's like, "Man, Kevin, this girl is amazing, and she lives right next door to me, and then you guys, I think, would just really hit it off." And my first question was like, "Okay, well, how many kids does she have?" And he said four, and I'm like, "Kyle, four?" I'm like, "Wow." And he's like, but Kev, they're really great kids, man.
Yeah.
And that just meant so much coming from my brother
Yeah.
that I'm like, okay, I'll meet her. And so he set it up. Him and his fiance had invited me over to their house for dinner one evening, and they invited Lisa over too, and that's how we met. And we just connected right from the get go. And within a week, we were having our first date outside of that, and we've been. And you know what? And she, on our second date, Mike, she just kind of laid down the law and just told me what she was looking for. And she goes, you know what? She goes, Kevin, if you're not looking for this, that is totally cool. But I'll just let you know where I'm coming from. She goes, I'm not looking to casually date or anything like that. She goes, I'm looking for somebody who's seriously looking for that right relationship to be in. So and if that's not what you're looking for, and if that's not where you're at, and you just want to date, that's totally fine. But I'm just letting you know that's where I'm at right now, And I just had so much respect for her for just laying it out that way. And I'm like, man, I like this girl.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great
And
story.
it has been an amazing journey ever since.
Yeah.
And so, well, now I'm curious. You shared two really valuable relationships here in your life. What is an example of a situation where you personally, Mike, got to make this really substantial impact? Maybe in the moment, maybe it even surprised you a little bit, where you were just like, wow, look at what happened there. And yet you also know that would have never been possible if not for your relationship with either one of the people that you've just mentioned. What's an example of a situation where you were empowered that way?
Well, I wouldn't have even gone down this career path if not for my wife,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I had wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur, as I mentioned, from the time I was in college, but it was hard to financially enable.
Mhm.
And I talked about it. I had a one company that I'd co-founded on the side, the t-shirt company that I referenced, with Norman Rockwell's art as the core piece. And uh, but doing that, I did that on the side. It wasn't a full-time effort.
Okay.
And what finally pushed the issue was that my wife got pregnant with kid number one.
Okay.
And I didn't see how I could juggle everything. I was commuting from San Francisco down to the South Bay. It was more than an hour commute each way. And I was trying to figure out how to do entrepreneurial things on the side. I had a very intense job. And then my wife said that it was okay for me to start a company and that we would make it work. She would help fund it and fund health insurance for both of us, and understanding that it would probably be a lean few years. And so I left my job in order to become a full-time entrepreneur the same day my wife went into labor with kid number
Wow.
one.
Wow.
Uh, so I was empowered, but
Yes,
really
you were.
she really empowered me.
Yeah. Wow. And you know that's that's pretty amazing when we have somebody that believes in us like that.
Yeah.
And I look at all the ways that my wife has supported me over the years too. And it's like, man, we get emotional thinking about that. It's like, when we realize that, like, we would absolutely not be where we are today if not for our wives.
That's certainly my story as well. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, for anybody that might be listening to this and thinking to themselves, man, Kev, I really love Mike. I love who he is. I love how he shows up. And maybe they'd like to just find out more about, what you're working on, or maybe just some stuff that you've shared has got them thinking like, man, maybe it might be worth having a conversation with Mike and stuff. Any resource, any websites we can share with folks?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got a website associated with my book, which is called Failure is an Option, and that's
And
failuresanoption.com.
okay,
And also, people should feel free to email me. My Gmail is mikegrossman86 at gmail.com.
okay.
And so I'd be very happy to talk to people. I enjoy that. And so if anybody's interested in having a sounding board or just having a conversation, I'm available.
Awesome. Well, so if you're listening to this and that's resonating with you, the contact information is right below there. Just scroll down and the links will be right there for you and stuff. But talk about your book really quick. And so, talk about your book. I'll just leave it open for you.
I never intended to write a book. It came about by accident, and I guess what I found is that in my life, the best things happen that way. They're
Mhm.
spontaneous, they're organic, they're unexpected, and this is one of those moments. So I was talking to a former colleague of mine after my last company was acquired, and I was telling some story, and he said, "You should write some of these things. You should write a book." And I initially dismissed it, but then another colleague later that day said that he agreed. And somewhere in there, I decided, what the heck, I'm going to try to do it. And so I wrote something that is intentionally different, I think, than most other business books. It's not a how-to, how to sell, how to market, how to raise money, and it's also not a hero's journey. I think the story often is here's a great idea and things go well, and then adversity strikes, and then the person comes through the adversity and they have this enormous amount of success. That's not been what my experience is. My experience is that business and entrepreneurial business is kind of a metaphor for life. And there's good things and bad things in kind of a random sequence, and you try to just navigate through it as best you can. And so, what the book is trying to do is bring to life what it really feels like to run an early stage venture funded entrepreneurial technology company, what it feels like practically, but more importantly, ethically and emotionally. And it's a series of stories, really, separate stories, each of which illustrate a theme, all the stories relating to the experiences I've had running six different companies like this.
Okay.
And it's very honest and about mistakes I've made and good things that have happened and the twists and turns that life takes. And
Yeah,
one of the key themes is I think luck plays an enormous role. Another one of the key themes is that I think people focus too much on results. And really, we don't have that much control over results. We have a lot of control over the input, over the effort we make. But what ends up happening is often unpredictable. And so I talk about all that and bring it to life.
awesome. Awesome. Well, is there any last thing that you feel led to share, Mike, before we call it a wrap?
Only to say thank you again for having me on, Kevin. I enjoyed talking to you before we recorded this in the kind of pre-meeting, and I've enjoyed speaking with you again. And I don't know you super well, but I can tell that we are pretty well aligned in terms
Yeah,
of uh, values,
for
fundamentally.
sure. For sure. Well, I want to thank you as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. I really appreciate it, Mike. I really appreciate you, and I'm excited to get this out there and share it with folks. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
You bet.